What's up, Packer family? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. Thanks so much for joining me today. And it is Romeo Doubs Deep Dive Day. We are going to go over the positives, the negatives, everything about your favorite fourth round Packers wide receiver, what I think he can bring to the team moving forward. So let's get started right away. Usually we start off with all of the athletic scores and where he tests athletically in comparison to his peers at wide receiver. Unfortunately, Doubs had a lingering knee issue, which meant that he did not test during his pro day or during the combine, which means we can't really compare him to other players. I do think he would have tested well athletically, especially for 6'2", 201, but we unfortunately just don't know and therefore can't compare him to where he would be in what percentile and things like that. Again, he is a 6'2", 201 wide receiver out of Nevada. He was a true senior. And I'll just start right away by saying one of my favorite aspects is actually his productivity over his 4 years at the University of Nevada. Now, when you think of a player who just turned 22 years old in April, you're probably thinking, all right, 18, 19, probably, maybe your fourth or fifth wide receiver, and maybe he came on the last couple seasons or something like that. This is a player with 4 years of productivity. He put 40 plus catches on the board in 4 straight seasons at Nevada, and again, just turned 22 years old. Even if you go back to just this last season, right? He scored a touchdown in 8 of his 11 games this past season, had at least 4 catches in every game, had at least 55 yards in every game, scored 2 touchdowns in each of his last 3 games, had a 19 catch game against Fresno State, and put back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons on the board. And even maybe more importantly than that is the fact that you look at his numbers year over year over year over year, and you get better every single season. And that's exactly what Romeo Doubs did. You could see the improvement not only on the stat sheet, but you could see it on tape. He was getting better as he went through his career at Nevada, and that's exactly what you want to see. You want to see a player that is using the tools that he has, but ultimately working at his craft and becoming a better wide receiver. You look at the difference, even though he was productive as a freshman, the difference from his freshman year to his senior year, and you see year over year growth and just a better overall, well-rounded wide receiver. And you're hoping that continues in the NFL, right? That he takes his craft to the next level year after year after year. Not too dissimilar from a Davante Adams, right? Who had so much, raw skill and potential and athleticism, but like it took those first few years, and year after year after year, he just honed his craft. That's the type of progression that you're hoping for from any wide receiver. But the fact that Doubs showed it year after year in his, again, 4 years at Nevada as a positive sign. And again, as a scouter, as a GM, those are the things and just sort of the intangibles that you're looking for when you pick this type of player in the 4th round. The other thing from a productivity standpoint I would mention is I actually think there was a lot more, for Nevada and Doubs to accomplish had maybe they gone in his direction just a little bit more. He was winning enough on the outside that I think if Carson Strong in Nevada would have targeted him a bit more, there would have been the potential for a lot more productivity there. Now, I get wanting to spread the ball around, wanting to feed all the different mouths on that Nevada offense, but I do think that based on how he was winning against the majority of the corners in that conference, that if they maybe would have, force-fed's the wrong word, but if they would have looked in his direction a little bit more, I think that the numbers would have been even better. And that's just not saying spamming one wide receiver or just like him needing to be a volume wide receiver. I just think he was winning enough and often enough that I actually think you could question whether or not they probably should have looked his direction a little bit more. And then the other thing too is he saw his fair share of double teams, bracket coverage, safety over the top. Teams were well aware of where he was on the field and trying to take him out of the game. Why they could do that, I'll get to more in just a moment. But I do think that played a part where, if, again, maybe he was playing at a college that had a little bit more of a well-rounded wide receiver core. I think maybe he doesn't quite get that double coverage and, again, the safety over the top. So I think, again, you bring him into a team like Green Bay where they're probably going to spread the ball around quite a bit. And you would think that, again, depending on how he's able to acclimate to the NFL, again, if he's not the guy that's getting the double coverage and he shows the ability to release and he's been so productive and he gets better year after year, again, you're hoping some of that stuff is going to translate as he makes his way to Green Bay. And now from a just pure skill standpoint, as you turn on the tape and are looking at him, I think the biggest thing that stands out to me is that he knows how to separate. And right now, in the NFL, and I've talked about this over and over at the wide receiver position, we are in the age of separation at wide receiver. Wide receivers that have to win at the catch point are becoming less and less popular. And wide receivers that know how to gain yards of separation through route running and eye manipulation and attacking a corner's blind side and all those sort of things, those are the type of wide receivers that teams want right now, because teams don't want their quarterbacks having to throw into coverage because bad things happen when that happens, right? So they want wide receivers who have the ability to use their route running and their releases at the line of scrimmage and just their innate ability as a wide receiver to separate so that quarterbacks can throw into open windows without having to throw into tight coverage and hope that the wide receiver is going to come down with the ball. And I do see that with Romeo Doubs. I see the ability to separate. I see the ability to attack corners. I see the ability for him to have a little bit of that artistry to his game that I talk about over and over, in the fact that, like, he's not totally advanced as a route runner yet, which we'll talk about more in just a moment. I still think there's things he can do better at his releases at the line of scrimmage, but he knows how to vary his tempo on his routes. He knows how to set corners up, meaning that you'll see him sort of, do a little bit of dancing at the line of scrimmage and then release. You'll see him quickly release. You'll see him sprint, and then corners get off kill, on tilt, I should say. And then he'll just cut it back and again, get real easy separation. You'll see him, string together 2 or 3 routes, some double moves. He just showed a variety of ways that he knew how to attack corners. And I think that's going to consistently get better as he becomes a more well-rounded route runner in the NFL, as he continues to work on his release package. But the fact that you see some of that artistry already. Now, I'm not comparing him here to Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, Terry McLaurin, whatever 1A route runner that you want to, point to in the NFL right now. But none of those wide receivers that I just named were completely set and ready in college football either. What you want to see is some of the development, for these college wide receivers, that they're starting to put together a plan on how to attack corners and starting to put some of that artistry together on how to put your releases together, how to vary those, how to vary your break points. And you start seeing some of that from Romeo Doubs. And again, your hope is that that continues to grow at the NFL level. And I think the other thing here is that he really shows that he can win deep. And I think, again, varying his speeds here and sort of setting up corners really helps him with this. Because, again, how he is sort of varying his speeds and releasing at the line of scrimmage is setting these corners up, because you'll see him release deep, and then his next one, he's cutting back. And again, he's got a lot of separation there. Same thing the other way around. You'll see him go, and try to set up corner. And then all of a sudden on the next play, he just sprints down the field, and they're expecting that setup. It's like a good pitcher in baseball, right? Who has a good changeup and a good fastball. Again, if you're throwing 106 miles per hour, a bit facetious there, but if you're throwing 106 miles per hour, what you do with your changeup doesn't quite matter as much. But if your gas is more around the 95, 94, 91, 90 mile an hour range, whatever, you better have a good changeup so that fastball looks faster. And I think that's what happens with Doubs. Now, I think he's fast enough in general, has good acceleration, good quickness off the line of scrimmage. But the fact that he can vary that pace and throw a changeup in there just makes it look that much faster when all of a sudden he sprints off the line of scrimmage and you're not exactly expecting it. So he sets up corners well. The change of pace works very, very well. It's something he can continue to do even a better job with, but you see enough of it where, again, if you're projecting, you're expecting him to be able to continue to grow in those areas once he reaches the NFL and becomes a pro at the position. Very clean mover. I do think he has some stiffness in his hips. I don't think he's going to be the most dynamic run after the catch guy, but I think overall, if you look at his initial quickness off the line of scrimmage and what he can do with his releases, again, it shows his ability to separate, and it shows the ability to start winning the route at the line of scrimmage. Again, not a completed process, not a completed player here. He still has a ways to grow. But again, I like the fact that he can move quickly off the line of scrimmage, use an initial burst and an initial quickness off the line, then accelerate, stack the corner, win deep, win on a 9, win on a post. Again, he shows he can win in a variety of different ways. And again, I think this is something that's going to hopefully be able to carry over to the Packers as he continues to become a pro at the NFL level. again, varies his releases well off the line of scrimmage. And I know some of the knock on him was that, like, well, he struggles a bit against press coverage. But again, I can show you plays where he struggles against press coverage. There's no question about that. But I can also show you a handful of plays where he has a quick release off the line of scrimmage and the corner's coming up to jam him and they don't even get their hands on him. And again, we're projecting these players to how they can become better players in the NFL. And when I see that he can do it. Now it's just repeating that process and coming up with a plan so that if they are pressing you, you know how to swipe the hands and get up the field. You know how to use that momentum against them and get up the field. And I've seen it on tape, which again would hopefully lead me to believe that he can do it with more consistency once he can repeat that process over and over and over and over. He also has very solid body control. He can contort his body in a variety of different ways to come up with difficult passes. He tracks the ball very well down the field, and that just goes to show you why he's been successful as a deep ball wide receiver down the field. He's not afraid to work the middle of the field. There are multiple plays on tape where he will go over the middle, take a hit, make a catch through contact. So you like to see that toughness over the middle. That's not always a trait that every wide receiver has. So you like that toughness. You like that mentality. He has the ability to pluck the ball outside of his body. You will see times where he is a very natural hands catcher. And again, using that body contortion and his ability to, sort of control his body and contort it in a variety of different ways and then pluck the ball up, down, middle, left, right. You see all of those plays on tape. And then, of course, he has some return ability as well. In fact, his very first touch in college went for an 80-yard punt return. So he didn't get used like a ton as a punt returner, but there's enough on tape there that shows you and leads you to believe that he could be a good punt returner in the NFL as well. So lots of positives to like there with Romeo Doubs. However, just like with any prospect, there's some negatives as well. I think the biggest maybe concern, if you're looking from a Packers offense, Matt LaFleur standpoint, is that he's not a physical blocker. In fact, he's just a bad blocker. Not a lot of effort there, not a lot of physicality. He's not going to, even like on those plays where he's coming like to dig out a safety or dig out a linebacker, like it's just he's going through the motions at best. So that's going to have to be something that he improves on if he wants to see the field at wide receiver for Matt LaFleur. Because if he doesn't do that, unless he's Devontae Adams or just a ridiculously amazing wide receiver, he's not going to see the field unless he can block. And right now, at least based on his college tape, he cannot block. And I would also just say in general, he's more of a finesse player. You're not going to necessarily see him go up and battle, bigger, more physical corners and win those 50-50 balls. You're not going to see him get off press super easily. You're not going to see him fight through contact and break a ton of tackles. You're not going to see him be a physical blocker. This is a finesse wide receiver. And that's not the worst thing in the world. You can live with that. But if you're looking for somebody who's going to run through a bunch of tackles and be your, next physical A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuel, this is not that guy. If you're looking for the next Allen Lazard as a blocker on the outside or a Hines Ward, this is not that guy. This is more of a finesse wide receiver. Despite being almost 6'2", 201, he is more of that finesse style wide receiver who wants to win with separation. Again, not a terrible thing, but that's just who he is as a player. The other thing, we talked about a negative from a Matt LaFleur standpoint, not blocking, which is going to make it tough to get on the field. Now, from an Aaron Rodgers standpoint, one thing I think Doubs really needs to work on is being more crisp and just precise on his routes and his timing. You could tell some of the timing routes he and Carson Strong just were not on the same page. And maybe it was on Carson Strong, but it happened enough that led me to believe that maybe there was some disconnect there. There were also some routes where he would round off or, again, just not be quite as precise. There are plenty of routes on tape where you can see him cut on a dime, make that 90-degree angle, and, get to the point that he needs to on the field to gain that level of separation, but it just needs to be more consistent, more precise, because we know if Aaron Rodgers sees him not running routes at the exact depth, at the exact angle, at the exact pacing that he needs it to be at, Rodgers is not going to want that wide receiver out on the field. So he's going to have to get better in that regards if he wants to see the field. So he's got a major Rodgers flaw and a major LaFleur flaw that he is going to have to correct if he wants to get out on the field and actually see balls come his way from his QB1. I do think he can do a better job of catching contested balls. There's plenty of plays on tape where he shows off good hands. There's plays on tape where he's making contested catches, but there's a couple plays specifically against the University of Hawaii where he has 2 contested balls deep and he drops both of them. There's another play. Maybe it was San Diego State. I forget exactly who it was against, but where he had the opportunity to come up with the ball. I think it was called pass interference on the play, but still had the opportunity to come up with it and didn't. I just think in some of those situations in college, the game's even obviously slower than it is in the NFL. Now in the NFL, you're going to have bigger, more physical corners who are faster, and everything's going to be contested. And he just is going to have to do a better job of coming up with those type of balls. The other thing from an Aaron Rodgers standpoint is I didn't think he did a great job of coming back to the football and opening up on scramble drill plays. So as the quarterback escapes the pocket and you want to sort of come open, I did not think Doubs did a really good job in that regards. And of course, it's not as much of a part of Aaron Rodgers' game as it used to be, but there are plenty of plays still where Rodgers is going to buy time, roll out, and you better be able to uncover in those situations. And it's not something that I thought Doubs did particularly well at the University of Nevada. While I think he can be a returner, and I do think he has some run after the catch ability, it should be pointed out that I don't think he's like this insanely super dynamic player after the catch. It's nothing that I'm like concerned about. It's not like he's completely stiff and not going to be able to get yards after the catch, but it's not like his 1A trait either. And again, I don't know that he's ever going to be this super dynamic run after the catch player in the NFL. Also wasn't expected to perform a full route tree, so he has a ways to go in really filling that route tree out and being a complete wide receiver who can run any route at any time. And then I mentioned before that teams were able to sort of play a safety over the top or double him or bracket him, etc. One of the reasons for that is he was primarily an outside wide receiver and almost entirely a right outside wide receiver. So in general, you want to see those players have a bit more flexibility. This past season, 614 of his snaps were on the right side, 83 were on the left side, and only 24 snaps as the left outside wide receiver. Only 6 snaps as the left outside wide receiver in 2020, and only 30 as the wide left wide receiver in 2019. Now, he did play 255 snaps at left wide receiver in 2018, but again, only 60 snaps total over the last 3 seasons as left wide receiver. So didn't play a ton in the slot, played a little bit there, almost not at all on the left side over the last 3 seasons. He's been almost entirely a right outside wide receiver. Now, as far as being an outside wide receiver, that's not a huge deal because Green Bay needs more outside wide receivers than slot guys. They've got Amari, they've got Cobb, Lazard can play inside, Watson can play some inside, Toure can play inside. Like, they have enough inside wide receivers, right? So if you want to keep them on the outside, that's totally fine. But the more versatility you have, the more likely it is that you can get on the field. Matt LaFleur wants to be able to play these wide receivers, at all of the positions. So it's not a tell when you put a guy out on the field. So that's going to be something that he has to work on as well. And then as mentioned, it doesn't seem like it's an issue, but he did have that injury to the knee that caused him to miss the combine as well as his pro day, but he looked just fine at rookie minicamp on Friday. So it doesn't seem like it's going to be an issue moving forward. All of that being said, I think this was a really sound pick by Brian Gutekunst. I think there's a lot of upside. He has the 1A thing that you're looking for at wide receiver right now, and that's the ability to separate. And I think that's only going to get better as time goes on. He had great productivity at Nevada, and again, got better year after year after year after year. So you're hoping that's going to be something that, again, continues at the NFL level. I know a lot of people are freaking out about Doubs and his potential and how Green Bay got a steal in the 4th round. I'm not quite there yet. I really like this pick, but I don't think they all of a sudden got this 1st round talent wide receiver. I think there's deficiencies in his game that he's going to have to improve. And if he doesn't improve the precision of his route running and his blocking on the outside and uncovering on scramble drills, it's going to make it a lot harder for him to get on the field. And again, if he only learns that right wide receiver position, the odds he gets on the field are less. So a lot of the times the name of the game is getting on the field first and then going out and making a name for yourself. If he doesn't show he can do some of those things, I think it's going to be more difficult for him to get on the field than people think. That being said, again, I love his ability to separate, and Green Bay is going to need wide receivers who can separate, period. So if he can get on the field that way, then all the power to him. But I do think he needs to round out his game a bit more before LaFleur and Rodgers have a lot of trust in him and put him out on the field a ton. Again, love his separation ability. It's arguably the most important trait, which again could get him out on the field. I like the play here by Brian Gutekunst. I think for a 4th round pick, there's enough upside. 6'2", 200 plus pounds, separation ability, maybe some return ability. He could play some gunner. Again, I like his ability to potentially become more of a pro at the position, continue to improve, and be a player that could be down the line, maybe a steal in the 4th round for Brian Gutekunst and company from this draft. But again, I'll just say it one more time. There's things that he needs to do to become a true professional at the position before I think he gets a ton of playing time out at wide receiver. So he's going to have to make the most of minicamp, OTA, training camp, preseason, etc. to prove to LaFleur and Rodgers that he can be trustworthy out there on the field with his precision, with his blocking ability, etc. Because if not, you know that Rodgers and LaFleur are going to say, hey, you're going to be inactive on game days right now until you get that down. So we will see. I like the pick. I think there's a lot of upside here. I just think it may take a little bit more time than maybe some people are thinking for him to really make an impact at wide receiver. Thanks so much for joining me today. Always appreciate it. I'll be right back here with an all-new episode, so make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.